Hello students, this is KV Ramana, lecturer of Zoology. Today we are going to continue the topic of exchange of gases. The continuity part of exchange of gases is second step which is involved in the exchange of gases is internal respiration or systemic gases exchange. What is meant by internal respiration or systemic gases exchange? The exchange of gases takes place between the tissue capillaries to the body cells. That means the tissue blood capillaries and body cells. So the exchange of gases between tissue blood capillaries and cells, right? So in this we are going to explain about how the exchange of gases takes place between the capillaries and body cells, and how the carbon dioxide exchange from the body cells to capillaries, right? Let me see. So as soon as the blood is oxygenated in the alveoli, the oxygenated blood is reaches to the left side of the heart, and during contraction of the ventricles, the left ventricle pump the blood to all parts of the body. The oxygenated blood is reaches to the capillary network. Then the exchange of gases will be takes place. But here one of the important thing you have to understand how the exchange of gases takes place, right? Here the partial pressures play very important role to exchange the oxygen from the tissue blood capillaries to cells, and carbon dioxide, it shows the reverse manner of the diffusion, right? Let me see the oxygen diffusion, right? So in the oxygenated blood, the partial pressure of oxygen is 95 mm of Hg. In the tissue fluid, the partial pressure of oxygen is 40 mm of Hg. In the cells itself, the body cells, the partial pressure of oxygen is 20 mm of Hg. So that the continuous supply of oxygen to regulate the metabolic activity of the cell, they need plenty of oxygen to produce the ATP. So to continuous process of metabolic activities in the cells, so there are more utilization of oxygen takes place due to difference in the partial pressure. See, the partial pressure of oxygen is the 95 in the oxygenated blood. In the case of tissue fluid, it is about the 40 mm of Hg. So oxygen moves from the blood capillaries to tissue fluid. Then in the cell, the partial pressure of oxygen is very less than the oxygenated blood, so that easily diffuses from the tissue fluid to cells, right? So like this, the oxygen will be diffuses from the blood capillaries into the cells, right? So now after utilization of the oxygen for oxygenation, right, for oxidation of the glucose, then carbon dioxide will be liberated. This carbon dioxide is formed the end product of catabolic reaction of the respiration. So as soon as the carbon dioxide is produced, okay, now it diffuses from the cells to tissue fluid or interstitial fluid to capillaries. Now, if you see the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the oxygenated blood is 40 mm of Hg. In the tissue fluid, it is about 45 mm of Hg. Next, in the cells itself, it is a 50 mm of Hg. So that the carbon dioxide moves from the cell to tissue fluid, from the tissue fluids to blood capillaries. Then it moves towards the right side of the heart and finally reaches to the lungs, and it starts the external respiration, right? So this is a process involved during the exchange of gases. One is a external respiration or exchange of gases in the pulmonary level. Second one is internal respiration. It is nothing but systemic gases exchange because it takes place in the organs and systems, right? And the main difference between the main site for the exchange of gases is alveoli and blood capillaries. This is a second place where the exchange of gases takes place, right? Let me say about some of the important things regarding the utilization of the oxygen also, right? So as soon as the blood is reaches to the body parts, right, so the oxygenated blood contain, right, more amount of oxygen, we know that, right? But when the person is resting condition, only 25% of oxygen only utilized by the body cells. When the person is resting condition, out of 100%, 70 out of 100%, only 25% of oxygen utilized by the cells. Rest of the 75% of oxygen is present in the deoxygenated blood. right? When this 75% of oxygen is utilized by an individual, right? When the individual is going to the vigorous activities or exercise, at the time body cells require more amount of oxygen, so the 75% of oxygen will be decreases in the deoxygenated blood due to vigorous activities. That is a very important event in the exchange of gases and utilization of the oxygen. And one more thing I want to explain about that, right? Ventilation, that is a breathing is a first step which is involved in the respiration. This is the second step, exchange of gases, right? So utilization of the gases is depends on the many factors. I want to say one of the important factor is altitude sickness, right? One is a altitude sickness, right? How altitude sickness is responsible for the slow rate of breathing, right? When we are going or when we are moving to the higher altitude, the rate of breathing will be increases. That means availability of oxygen is decreases. What is the reason behind this? Okay, now when you are going to the higher altitudes, the total atmospheric pressure will be decreases, right? So if you see the partial pressure in the sea level, the partial pressure of sea level, what is that in the atmosphere is 159 mm of Hg, right? But in the alveoli it is about 104 mm of Hg. In the oxygenated blood it is about 95 mm of Hg. In the tissue fluid it is about 40 mm of Hg. In the cells itself it is about the 20 mm of Hg. That means the partial pressures are decreasing from the atmosphere to cells. But when we are moving to the higher altitudes, the atmospheric partial pressures will be decreases. For example, let you see when you are moving the 10,000 feet in altitudes, when you are moving the 10,000 feet above our sea level, then the partial pressure of oxygen become a 110 mm of Hg, right? When you are moving 20,000 feet in altitudes, it is becoming 74 mm of Hg. That means in sea level, you know already 159 mm of Hg, right? As you know, wherever you go, the concentration of oxygen will be 20.9% in the atmosphere. But due to lack of the partial pressures in higher altitudes, right? So the person is going to the higher altitude sickness, right? So what are the symptoms of high altitude sickness? The high altitude sickness, mostly what is that? Shortness of breath, right? Because the breathing rate will be completed within the minute. Actually, in the resting condition, when a person is at sea level, the complete breathing takes only 5 seconds. But when you are going to the higher altitudes, more number of breaths are required, right? Because the partial pressures are very less. In that, oxygen partial pressure is very less. Then it leads to, whenever the shortness of breath, automatically brain cannot receive the oxygen, so it leads to headache and fatigue, some type of it leads to anemia, nausea and insomnia also. The people who are living in the higher altitudes, now they feel with the poor sleepiness, they would not get the proper sleep, and finally it leads to the dizziness, right? Slowly what happens now, some people are live permanently in the higher altitude because compared with the sea level, the people who are living the higher altitude, they need more number of RBC, right? The production also will be more and number of breaths also will be more compared with the sea level, right? Let me see the next step. We are going to explain about the transportation of gases, right? Thank you.